Today we're going to be going over our fascia mount system. I am just going to give a minute here for any last minute attendees to hop on, and then we'll get started. All right, let's get started on our fascia mount presentation. Thank you everyone for taking your time to be here today. Appreciate it very much. Gonna quickly go over the fascia mount system. It's a pretty cool system. If I was building a new deck, I would be building it specifically for fascia mount. It just the aesthetics of it alone, I think, but also the function of it is pretty great. So what that looks like, if you haven't seen it before, are these three brackets over here on the side. We have a line bracket and an inside and outside corner bracket, so that will do any square deck. I have done plenty of fascia mount takeoffs on decks with um, 45-degree angles or any kind of weird angles like that. You just have to double post. There's no infinitely adjustable fascia mount bracket at this moment. But yeah, it is usable basically on any deck. You just sometimes we'll need to do a little bit more double posting, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. But some of the benefits of the fascia mount are really the biggest one for me is the space savings. So when you're taking your post from on top of the deck and then moving it off to the side, you get actually a good chunk of space back on your deck. So that looks like every linear foot of railing that you have, you get an extra 6 square inches back to your deck. So, a 100 feet of railing, which is, not really, it's a larger deck, but that's definitely not unheard of. If you have 100 feet of railing on your deck, you get an extra 50 square feet added to your deck. It's pretty substantial. Um, Especially substantial for those like smaller, like apartment style, tiny little decks that you maybe can get a chair or two out there, and you add the fascia mount in there, and now you can get a chair and a grill instead of just a chair. So it does add up, and you really see that difference, um, especially on the smaller decks when you're adding a good chunk of space to a small area. Um, Another great benefit of that for commercial settings, because this is usable and tested for commercial. Um, we had a example of a restaurant that added 5 tables to their outdoor seating area by switching from a surface mount to a fascia mount, and that's a substantial amount of revenue added. So it really is, a big space saver. The other thing is the aesthetics of it. You're also taking that bulkier surface mount post. I say bulkier just because of the attachment method. There has to be an attachment method somehow. Unless you're using a sleeve, you are having like a bulkier uh, uh, post bottom, and then you're taking that and you're putting it off the deck, and you really get a better sight line with that. It just visually from the deck looking out looks like you have way more space. Um, so it's really good in that regard. And the third reason is water intrusion. If you have a deck over top of any kind of finished area, so like a rooftop deck, or even a deck where you want to have usable space usable space underneath it, like a patio underneath. There's really no way to permanently waterproof a uh, a surface mount post or even a sleeved post that it's coming up through the deck. You're always going to be relying on some sort of caulking or some sort of degrading material that will eventually allow leaking. So the fascia mount allows you to move that post to the outside fascia where it can be very easily flashed, and no water will be dripping down on top of your finished patio underneath, or even worse in an interior situation where you have a rooftop deck. You won't ever have to worry about water coming in and actually coming inside of the house. So it's available for 2.5 and 3.25 posts, and also available any of those posts as well. So you can use this with horizontal cable as well as any of our other infills. So it's pretty versatile in that way. And with the horizontal cable, there is a intermediate baluster mount to allow you to keep using that intermediate baluster so that you're all code compliant. It's really the only unique infill. So with everything else, you would order your fascia mount posts, and you would then just order a American square baluster system or Outlook square baluster, American vertical cable, whatever. But the one thing you do have to be a little wary of is if you are using horizontal cable on fascia mount, there's a separate product, which is the American horizontal cable fascia mount. And really that's just so that you get these longer intermediate balusters that can attach to the fascia of the house. So yeah, usable with any kind of infill. Yeah, again, here are those brackets. These are made out of a single extrusion cut down in plant, and then we mill in these pockets for the bolts. So it's all a very strong design. It's not a cast material like some of the other mounts we see out there on the market. There is a plate on the bottom that looks like it's raw in this picture for some reason, but it is powder coated to match. So that plate goes in the bottom and covers the bottom of the post, so you don't have any bugs, spiders, bees making nests up inside of the bottom of your post. So that's what they look like. Again, no like 45s or 10 degrees or whatever for these weird decks. Still use these just fine with a radius rail. So you can do radius railing with fascia mount just fine. But the only caveat would be those 45-degree corners having to double post. And then here where we get to the other double posting scenario, which is corners going downstairs. Because those stairs are typically dropped right off of that rim board on a deck, you are going to need to double post at the top there. There's a way to get around this, which is, and you can see at the bottom left here, the reason for why that is. So the 6-inch sphere rule is code for the maximum allowable space between tread and riser on a stair, that little triangle that's created by the tread and riser. So you can see with the fascia mount bracket that's attached to the stringer here, you can see that the bottom cable passes right through that sphere, not allowing it to pass. But if you were to run cable like around a corner post on this top post that you see that's attached to the rim of the deck here, with that hypothetical red line would be where the bottom of your cable goes. Again, the reason that is because deck stringers are typically dropped so that the rim board itself is the first rise. It's kind of strange because this is a very common practice for decks, but on interior stairs, almost always the first stair is built into the stair, and that's actually how it's attached. Um, so a way to get around this on the corners would be to basically raise this first step up, this step right here. If you would raise that up to level, then you would be able to use a single corner post. And then you would just have your steps would all be sort of one step ahead. So again, this is how basically all interior steps are done. Um, I shouldn't say all of them, but it's a standard practice for doing interior steps. For whatever reason, just the attachment method. We don't typically do that with decks. But if you want to get away from that double posting, so a different framing method can be done. And yeah, and then we can get away from double posting. When you are when you are starting a transition down the stairs and it is a straight line, in other words, let me get my pen back out here. Whoa, wrong button. What am I doing? Turning on subtitles. Sorry about that. So if you have basically your deck here and a post coming up here, that's a horrific post right there. So this would be a fascia mount post on the side of the deck. You can run your cables down, a straight line like this. You just have to make sure that post is, back a few inches. Really no different than a surface mount post in that scenario. So it's very common to have a straight run of stairs like this, like we see on this side. It's really common to have that as a just single post, and then you would have to double post on this other side unless you've framed your stairs differently. It's a very easy thing to do if your deck framers are the same ones that are going to be putting on the railing and they've thought that far ahead. It's really not any harder. In fact, I think it's a good bit easier than dropping your stringers like this, but it's just something that would have to be thought of. So ordering with the fascia mount, basically, like we said before with the horizontal cable, everything but that horizontal cable section is ordered the same. You would just order fascia mount posts instead of a surface mount post. This is the quote request form that we offer that just has basically everything we need. Everything's kind of behind here, but we have everything we need to create an order. If you guys don't have this resource, I'm happy to send it out to you, but just send me an email. This is just how we prefer to do things. You're welcome to use your own systems, but this is just a helpful tool for me. But regardless, however you are dictating, the products that you need to order, it really is as simple as switching your surface mount to a fascia mount. So here are some pictures of what that looks like installed. Here we have some vertical cable, looking beautiful. Really, so obviously with this bracket, there's some extra cost, but you do have to consider the fact that these posts are now just straight extrusions. There's no welded plate. We don't have to tap all the holes and insert the set screws, drill and we machine that welded plate out of a single block of aluminum, and then we have a robo welder that welds it on. So there's a lot of processes involved in putting that welded plate on that have gone. So the fascia mount really doesn't end up being that much more expensive, even though it's a significant increase in value. Um, so that's something to consider. I think people see those big bulky fascia mounts and they assume that it's going to be an additional, $400 uh, a post, but it's really not the case. It's really relatively uh, cost efficient. I see a question that came across here. Fasteners attach the bracket to the fascia. So attaching the bracket to the deck. Um, it's really the same way that we sell our surface mount posts, as it does not automatically come with them. We can sell those, but just as with the surface mount posts, technically to pass code, you need to have a through bolt. We find that the majority of our customers do not use a through bolt; they just use lags, which is fine and very structural. It just doesn't technically pass code, and there's a small handful of inspectors out there that will fail it for that, even though it's plenty strong. So in order to get away from, sending out through bolts for everyone, and then 90% of our customers, maybe 95% of our customers don't use the through bolts anyway, we sell all of the bolts and the attachment methods separately. You're totally fine to sell your customers whatever you have in stock. We don't make any money off of selling bolts and lags. Um, we just have it so you can all get it all from one order, especially for job lots. That's very helpful. But yeah, so to answer your question, no, they are not sold with the fascia, similar to our surface mount posts, sold separately and sort of letting it up to the installer on how they actually want to bolt it. We have the approved method, but recognize that there are uh, many many different ways to install surface and fascia mount posts that are completely acceptable as far as structural, uh, but somehow not acceptable by code. So hopefully that answers your question. I think we have a few more pictures here. Yeah, this is kind of an example of those, really tiny decks that can really benefit from a fascia mount, especially with the horizontal cable here. It just makes it look like, you know, there's no railing there at all. You can imagine having the railing being set here up on the deck surface, how much uh, usable space would get taken from this deck. It would feel much more cramped. So this is really a very cool system to give you more space and more freedom on your deck. It's also, you'll notice, over top of another deck, and maybe there's some more above here. There is actually, if you look in the distance there. And so that fascia mount allows you to flash everything properly so that your neighbor underneath you doesn't have water dripping on his head over time. Another couple examples here. Seen a lot of cable with this fascia. I find that tends to be what happens. It's more like the customers that can afford a horizontal cable rail can afford a few dollars extra on the fascia mount posts to really make the most out of their deck. But like I said before, it's really not as expensive as a lot of people would initially think, because you're getting rid of that base plate on the surface mount. Yeah, it really, no reason you can't use this with an Outlook square baluster, a more cost-effective rail can use this just fine. So that's all I have for you guys today. I appreciate you all stopping in. Again, if you have any more questions, I say this every week, but if you have any more questions, you can always reply to that email that was sent out to you to remind you of this webinar, and that will come to me directly. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about fascia or anything and any other products in general. And other than that, we have at 11 o'clock here, we have a rod rail webinar coming up. That's a really cool system, our newest infill that I think you guys will be really interested to see. So we'll hopefully see a bunch of you guys then. And thank you, appreciate you being here, and we'll see you later.